Welcome to the Deliberate Exchange. I'm so excited for today's conversation. I am talking with Anthony, who is the founder of the Alchemy of Breath, and his work has helped literally thousands of people around the world, and they learn how to use their breath to heal, reconnect, and remember who they are. Anthony brings a big depth and groundedness that's rare. His work supports people through grief and trauma, anxiety, addiction and life transitions, and all through a trauma-informed, heart-centered lens. And I wanted to just share a quick story about how this all came to be, because it's a perfect example of the work that I'm always talking about on this podcast and the power of breathwork. So a few weeks ago, I got an email from somebody saying that Anthony, this founder of Alchemy of Breath, is looking to be on podcasts. And my first reaction was like, this seems pretty spammy, so I ignored it almost. But then something nudged me to follow up. So I reached out to the Alchemy of Breath on Instagram. Laura responded, and it turns out it was real. They were, in fact, looking for podcasts, although they had no idea who had sent the original email. Now, the truth is, even when I confirmed that this was legit, I had a moment of like, why me? Why would somebody like Anthony, who has decades of experience, a global audience, and a deeply respected work, come to my show? And it was that old familiar voice of scarcity and smallness. But because of breath work and nervous system work that I do and teach, I could feel it. I could pause and flip the script and say, why not me? And that reframe came from the deeper place that conscious connected breath has helped me access. The part of me that knows I'm worthy, that I'm a match, that I don't need to earn a seat at the table, that I am, in fact, the table. And so with that, I am honored to have Anthony here with us. His work has impacted, as I said, thousands around the world, and with a truth that healing starts with the breath. So, Anthony, before we get into your story, I'd love to start by asking you this. What do you feel that the world needs to remember most about the breath right now?
I really want to answer the question, but I'm also feeling what you just said and the story you just told, and this tiny little moment that changed everything for you. And I'm feeling very humbled by it, honestly, and grateful that you came on anyway. So that you did continue and that we are here together. So thank you very much for having me.
Of course.
It's my honor to be here too. So. Um, So what was the question again?
What does the world need to know about the breath or remember about the breath?
Gosh,
What?
what a great. I think first of all that everything, every single thing, every single moment of your life is informed by your breath, or can be. Instead of your life informing the way you breathe, you can actually turn that around, a bit like you did in your own experience. I think it's a metaphor and it's so symbolic of what is possible. It's like, what if the opposite of what my mind is telling me is true?
Mm-hmm.
And um, and with the power of the breath, we really get to find out. It's as if unless we are going to explore the power of our breath, we are firmly embedded in seeing one side of the coin only. So what would it be like to see the other side of the coin and to consider what we don't know, we don't know?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I started this story with the breath when I was 8 years old, and it's been like 63 years or something now, and I feel like I know this much about it. It feels like a never-ending inquiry for me, and it's ever more fascinating. It's not like I've passed a peak. It's teaching me so much, and I get reminded by my teachers, who are mostly my students,
Yeah.
so much of its value, and I see how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that have changed their lives using just the power of the breath. It's like, yes, please, let's remember it. And that word remember might mean something than we think it means too. What if it means remembering, making membership again with who we really are, with those parts of who we are that we've forgotten, we've learnt to cover with layers of forgetting.
Yeah.
What if we can reconnect with those and become more whole and more abundant and more present?
Beautiful. I love that. And I also love that, like, y your integrity as a facilitator and being able to learn from your students as well, and that you're just scraping the surface of the breath. I think that a lot of people get into the healing space, and their own healing journeys, and they have an ego or an audacity to think, okay, I do a couple breathwork journeys, I'm good. There's nothing more to see here. And their growth and capacity can often stall out. So, what would you say to people to help them move past that ego barrier that we might come against?
Well, I have a story to tell. I was living in Bali at the time, and I'd come out of a period of 7 years of sitting, of meditation in India and in Bali, and I started a restaurant called Alchemy, and that took off and still is thriving today. And that led to then working with Breathwork. It was a health restaurant, health food restaurant, raw food restaurant. And I think I was at the top of my game, and I felt good about it. I felt really good that I was giving breathworks and the rooms were full and people, there were queues outside, and I was kind of shy and, timid about it, but I was very grateful, and I was also quite egotistical. I was proud, and I went to see a man who's become a friend, not a convenient friend, but a true friend. And he gave me a reading. He was he still is an astronomer, very astrologer, very good one. And he said to me, you are meant to minister to millions. There's absolutely no question about that. But if you do it with ego, you are going to crash so darn hard that you may even die. And I was like, oh, okay. I got goosebumps now as I remember that moment. This is serious. And within probably 7 or 8 months of that event, I got seriously ill to the point where I couldn't move, and I lay in bed for it's actually three events, three times I came close to death, and each of those times was the same thing. It was parasites that I'd picked up in Southeast Asia, and they were killer parasites. They're ones that kill you, but nobody can find them. So I lay in bed getting tested for HIV and this and every other parasite in the world. This parasite, they couldn't find anything. But during that time, I was lying in bed and I couldn't really move because moving would create a stabbing pain. So I learnt to lay still, and I learnt that I could survive on a minimum amount of breath if I could kind of fool my lungs they weren't expanding and contracting, and they didn't hurt. I didn't get the pain. So I found this still point that I could live in. And for about probably 6 or 8 weeks, I was in this state of stillness. And that's when I got to explore, well, how can I give up what I've done? What would life look like without purpose?
Hmm.
What would my life look like without purpose? And I think that was probably the low point of that experience. But since then, with every room that's been filled, with every breather that's come out the other side of an experience and is illuminated or has achieved some kind of quantum shift, I feel smaller. I feel actually more humble and more grateful that I've been chosen to do this work, and I feel that I'm the guardian of a transmission that's been going for millennia, timeless transmission, and that I really need to behave myself. Some people say, "God, you're amazing. How did you know that?" And I just say, "Well, I'm just doing what I'm told. Really, I'm doing what
Right.
I'm told." So
From source, yeah.
eventually, I became a good boy, and I'm doing what I'm told.
And how do you differentiate from feeling proud because the work that you're doing and the ripple effect that it is creating is something to be proud of? And so how do you walk the line between having pride in that? Because I think that's a really important thing to have as a little bit of motivation versus teetering into ego-driven
Yeah, I'm not sure about
intention.
It's a good question. I'm not sure where I stand with that. I, I'm, I'm, I'm not even driven to do this. I'm called to do this, and
Mm,
um, the urgency is immense when you look at the chaos that's in the world. And I've been a student of the human condition for so long, for 4 decades, 5 decades, that um, I've really learnt to understand what makes us tick and what stops us from ticking. And
mm,
that's meant discovering a lot of my own darkness and my own shame and all of those things that all of us have. Of course, when we're embedded in that moment of deep and negative self-reflection, we think we're the only ones in the world that could feel something like this, and we don't want anybody else to know, and all of those things that we go through. But I think I don't know if it's actually even pride. I think it's just dharma. This is
mhm.
it's gratitude because this is what I'm meant to do,
Yeah.
and and it opens doors for me wherever I go. I mean, I was in the most extraordinary of circumstances last week. I got chosen out of 1,300 speakers to go speak at the Society for Human Resources Management in San Diego, and I've never considered taking this work to the business world before, even though I was born and raised to be in the corporate world, and I left it quite young. Um, but I I did it because the call came, and I had no idea what I was going to say, because before that I was working with an American lady, Hoda Kotb, on her app. We're co-developing an app for her, and with breath techniques and things, and that's what I was focused on. And then this talk came the next day. I had to fly from New York to San Diego to give this speech, and so I quickly worked on my slides on the plane, and I got there, and then of course slide machine broke down. So I was like, okay, well, I got a few hundred people here. I just tuck into what wants to happen, and it was a wonderful experience. I realized how much I'd been carrying against that lifestyle because I'd rejected it as a child. But I found these people, or a young man, but I found these people so ready and so willing and so eager to understand how something so simple could cause such dramatic changes. And so that's the nature of the calling. If I get the call, I'll go there and I'll do it. And
Mhm.
and it's my job. It's my job to get people to breathe. And it's like giving candy back to the baby. It's,
Right.
you know,
I love that. And I think that it's when we are open to following these little pings from the universe and these callings or these pulls, uh, even in what led us to this moment in talking together, as I said, stemmed from a breathwork journey that I had done in April. And my mentors always guide us to having like a voice recorder on hand so we can speak into it, whatever might come through. And my mentor at before the journey had started had talked about how somebody had come into her world that was somebody of significance. And when I was deep in the journey, right, like I'm in this activation, this conscious connected breath, I get a download from the universe that says there's somebody like that for you, and their name starts with A. And then when these emails started coming about this particular discussion, and your name is Anthony, I was like, that's the connection point. And that's why I had to follow the impulse to like check in. And that, like, none of that would be possible if I wasn't open to tapping into my breath, into deeper levels of consciousness, and remaining open as part of what I feel is my calling. Now, I'd be curious because you have led thousands through breathwork journeys and this work. What's something that you like still discover or are surprised by when you drop into your own breath?
well, I am continually surprised, for sure. Um, I, first of all, physiologically, what's happening when we do a conscious connected breath is we are slowing down our thoughts in the frontal lobe. So for me, always the question when I go into a breath work is, what's going to happen with that space? And I can go in there with intention or not intention, doesn't really matter, but certainly curiosity and as much innocence as I can reclaim, and as little projection or expectation and all of those things. And I think for me, it's I've always been a film buff. I guess it's the analogy I'm going to use. It's like sitting there in the cinema waiting for the first scene to come on with such a no expectation, but absolutely 100% expectancy. Like I am so ready to receive whatever it is that wants to be given or gifted to me as a result of this experience. So I've got my noticing lens pretty polished, and I've got no needs, no expectations, no hurry, no place to go other than to come here more with each breath. And the reward is just completely disproportionate to the effort that I'm having to put in. So
Right.
I'm just super happy every time I get to do it. It doesn't mean every experience is good. Some of them are more demanding and more challenging. Some of the teachings are more difficult to receive. But I'm a devoted student. I'm a devotee,
Yeah.
for sure, and an
Love,
evangelist. So.
love that. Just going back to what you said about the physiology of breath work and what happens, and the work that you're now getting into in the business world. From my own experience, I worked in commercial construction for 16 years. I do a little bit of training with breath work to the corporate world because I find it's more accessible, because it's not like, okay, we're going to meditate, and people have I feel like a barrier when it comes to meditation because it seems too out there. But the breath, which I like to describe as magic wrapped up in science, feels like an easier transition. So I'd love to hear your perspective on how breath work specifically bridges the gap uh, to help the corporate world with this, uh, yeah, with their body, their stress, their physiology.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to look at what are some of the challenges and the problems that people face, especially I think everybody faces them. The corporate world maybe uses a slightly different language than anybody else, but we're all human. We all have the same color blood underneath. So I think what's common in all walks of life is that the more anxious we become, the less creative we become. And this can be traced back to original traumas that might have happened, and the choice of fight, flight, or freeze, which is a pretty reduced choice of action. And the fact that we can't think we just can't think straight. We lose the ability to think in terms of what choices we might have. So I notice as I work and in my own being that the more my anxiety level goes up, the less present I am,
Mm.
and the more I move towards the three choices. And that's because my operating system is moving towards the amygdala, towards the back of my brain, and I'm not engaging my frontal lobe so much. So the first employment of breath is about being conscious with breath and using it to have an effect on my nervous system. And I think in the corporate world, that's particularly important. It's not necessary to do a conscious connected breath. That's not really the point. The point is, how can I employ simple breath patterns and simple breath systems to help people feel more agency, more creativity, and to be able to manipulate their nervous system to their advantage. And that sounds like a big thing, but I think anybody who works with breath work would agree that in as much as the way you breathe is symptomatic of the way you feel in any given moment, if you change the way you breathe, you can also change the way you feel. I think it's one of the only, maybe rapid eye movement therapy as well, but I think with breath work particularly, if I breathe when I'm panicking, when my energy is really fast and my vibration is really fast, and I breathe short breaths, if I breathe a slow calming breath, I will calm down. If I'm feeling really sleepy, like I was in San Diego, and I had jet lag and it was a red-eye flight, and then I was huffing and puffing for 50 or 60 seconds before I went on stage, so I could get more vigorous, so I could invigorate myself. So that's the brake and the accelerator. Those are two very fundamental switches we've got, or gauges that we can use, but there are hundreds of others. It's a complicated dashboard. There are lots of knobs and buttons to twiddle and press. So so the discovery of that, I think, is really what certainly what my talk was about, and what the people found compelling is that they could all of a sudden have agency.
Yeah.
So in my difficult relationship, when I get to work and my boss is looking through the window and is giving me that glare, I can take a breath.
Yeah.
I can take a breath. I can regain my autonomy. I can take another 10 breaths if I want to.
Yeah.
I can even go in there and ask my boss if she wants to take a few breaths with me. And a lot of that talk was about inspiring them in that way, because if you go into your company or into any environment and you say, let's all take a breath together, much like you did at the beginning of this event today, then it changes everything. Everything changes. We all take one step closer to presence. Like, oh yeah, let's do that together. And the fact that we're doing it at the same time makes it harmonious, makes it resonant, so we can get along better.
Yeah.
Pretty basic, fundamental stuff, isn't it?
It really is, and I think that people tend to overcomplicate it, and that's why I love the accessibility of the breath, especially in the settings where people feel often powerless, right? Like they are working for somebody, they're always behind a deadline, whatever the case may be. And when you have such a fabulous mechanism in which to disconnect from the discourse in your brain and get that agency, as you mentioned, uh, it will shift everything. Like you're removing your cognitive impairment and giving yourself a fighting chance to have a better conversation, a better workflow, a better meeting, like whatever that happens to be. And to your point earlier, it doesn't have to be like a big, long, conscious, connected breath journey. It's in these simple micro shifts. What do you think though? Because I find that people are like, well, I'm not going to take the time to do this. Like I feel funny about taking deep breaths or doing any kind of like somatic tapping in public. So how do you tell people like, don't worry what people think, like it's not a big deal. Like you're not the weird one for taking a breath.
No, it's true. You're actually the hero if you're the one that's taking the breath, and
Yeah,
that will inform other people too.
right.
Um, there was a story when because I work a lot at board level and CEO level and founder CEO level, and this is my first excursion now into the realms of upper and middle management, and it's exciting. But I remember a story that happened to me with Alchemy in Bali, back in the old days. This must have been 17 or 18 years ago, where we had about 7 or 8 different shareholders, and one of them was extremely unhappy with the way things were. She was not able to communicate her distress and was not able to articulate it in a way that was not aggressive. It was hostile. And so we had this very critical board meeting, and I remember going in there and I thought, oh, I'm just going to get everybody to breathe. So I said, there were, I think there were 8 of us, and I said, let's just take 10 breaths together before we start, because you could feel the room was bristling. People were positioning and defending and, creating positions. And so we did, and she was the only one that refused to. She was like, I'm not going to do this. And it was interesting because I thought, oh, this probably isn't going to work. But actually, by the 10th breath, she got it. She got the download that she saw everybody else doing it. And just that, it wasn't even that she had to breathe herself, just that reflection from other people who were dropping into a state of presence meant that she got the download. She got infected. She got
Yeah.
touched by it. She got inspired. And the meeting was a breeze. It was like, how can we help each other through this? We've got a difficult situation here. Here's so and so, and she's upset. How can we hold it together so she can walk out of this room and feel it's resolved?
Yeah.
And it was just like a beautiful human experience. So I can't remember what your question was or whether I nailed it or not, but that
I
story
think you
really,
nailed it.
I did. Okay. All right.
I think you nailed it because I think that when people understand how easy it is to tap into that and like they hear it more from people like yourselves and myself, it does start to infect in the best possible way, right? Like we start to learn, and even like it moves to the forefront of your consciousness when you hear it in different movies, right? Or you like it becomes this interrupter. And even before I got into breath work and being deliberate about a practice with breath work, I I remember I was an amateur boxer, and in between
Was it
rounds,
the boxer? My goodness.
I know, like, and talk about fighting against your physiological response of fight or flight when somebody's hitting you in the face. You want to get out of there, and now you're working literally against it. But in between rounds, my coach, like the very first thing they would say to me is take a deep breath, right? We're in a sympathetic charge. We need to bring things down so you can see the punches that are coming at you and start to navigate that. And like that was years before I got into breath work, as I said. So it's just curious how it starts to come to the forefront, but how resistant we can be to that,
Yeah.
right? And I think that leads into a question that I had about like the difference between knowing something to be true. Like we can read all the science reports and we can talk about how effective breath work can be, but then to move from actually doing it and then feeling it in the body, how do we shift people from that? Like how like I'd love to get your thought on that because I think that even in my own healing and with the women that I work with, there's that, okay, I know it, I understand it, I'm a smart woman, but I don't feel it. And even like when it comes to journaling about like worth and saying the affirmations and understanding intellectually that I'm enough, you know, I'm still bracing, I'm still shrinking, I'm still overfunctioning, not doing the things that I know will help me.
Yeah. I mean, we really do want a quick fix, don't we, as
Oh,
humans? You know,
yeah.
where's that Advil or whatever it's called? You know, what's the quickest way I can manage this situation? I think with breath, I think for me, breath 101 is to be aware that that's what you're doing.
Mm.
Breath 102 is to catalog the ways you breathe in different circumstances and either mentally or literally write them down. Then it goes into stages of um, once you've discovered a full range of breaths that you use when you wake up, when you go to sleep, what helps you settle down to go to sleep, what happens when you're angry, what happens when you're impatient, what happens if you see someone wounded or hurt, what happens if you feel compassionate, what happens if your children do, what happens when you make love, all of these different things, that becomes your toolkit of breaths that you can use if you want to recreate that situation. So we can move away from being overly sympathetic and stimulated by outer world events, and we can become more powerful and creative about the way we want to feel in any given situation. But you're right. this is happening. I'm feeling it. How am I going to remember to breathe when it's time to remember to use it as a tool? And I think that's really because, and I think this is Breathwork 103 or 104, is you need to practice it when you don't need it.
Right.
Practice it when you don't need it, and to make it normal. There's so much that's abnormal about being conscious of our breath that if you're listening to me now and I ask you, are you breathing? You're suddenly going to become aware of, oh yeah, I'm breathing. That's how quickly I ask it again, and that's how quickly we forget about it. We dissociate from it. So there's something about needing to redescribe a new normal, and that's not a mountain to climb.
Mm.
It seems like it might be, but actually we've got the best tool in the world, which is the breath. And no matter what subconscious scripts we might have that say otherwise, that want us to get the adrenaline surge and feel the tension and say the wrong thing at the wrong time, or not help ourselves when we're under duress, the best way to reinform the subconscious is with the breath, because it's repetitious. So when you repetitiously choose to breathe consciously, you may imagine you're even bringing the breath back to a time in your life when you lost it unconsciously. There's something very deeply healing about weaving the breath through our consciousness back to times in our lives that we learned that it was normal not to breathe, when we were frightened or shocked or wounded or hurt. So the practice of doing that, and the practice of actively choosing each time that we do it, every conscious choice that we make makes us more creative. So if I'm going to sit down and consciously choose to breathe 100 breaths, I'm going to be much more competent at choosing to breathe after that 100 breaths than I am right now. But if I'm going to try do it when the pressure's on and the things are going pear-shaped and I'm under duress, it's not going to work.
Sure.
So I don't even bother anymore. So I think it's really about readjusting the human mind that wants a process that we can complete, and then we've dealt with the issue, and rearranging the way we think to actually this is a practice that is so friendly and so benign. It's a practice, not a process. It's
Right.
something that I'm doing anyway for the rest of my life. I'm going to do it. So
Yeah.
why not join it with my consciousness and see the magic that can happen? And we haven't even touched a conscious connected breath at this
Yeah.
point. We've just talked about breath awareness,
Sure.
So yeah.
And especially doing it in those reinforcing the concept in those low stimulus environments. I think that people do, get the idea. And even in this story that I shared with boxing, I'm in a high stimulus
Yeah.
event. Okay, now we're going to deploy the breath, but learning to use that on a consistent basis and make something that you're inherently doing and just coming more online to something, like it shifts everything. I also love what it can do. So, just a background and context on myself, I have been sober for 5.5 years. I used alcohol as my stress relief, as my coping mechanism, as my numbing agent,
Right.
putting a great pause button on everything that I didn't want to touch. Because I removed alcohol from my life and I no longer have that stress relief, I use the breath. In the work that I do with the women that I work with, they're looking for this relief, and this is often the number one thing that I tell them when they're having the urge, okay, I need to have a drink or I'm feeling stimulated, like take a breath. I'm just curious, in the decades of experience that you have, how often do you have people coming into your universe that are battling an addiction of some sort, and how is that mitigated effectively with the breath?
Well, I get a lot of people. Um, I think the only thing it's okay to be addicted to is the breath.
Agreed.
The only supportive addiction that really blesses us all the time. but I do deal with a lot of addiction, and one of my um, main focuses is to work with inner child work, because I believe that the um, the slide into addiction is because of something. You hear, for example, Gabor Mate that speaks of it as a lack of connection, um, and I also believe it's a lack of connection with self. So, what is it in the person that I'm dealing with that is broken? And I don't think that's exclusive to people who have addictive tendencies. I think it's actually part of our human condition that we are born into a dualistic life, and we're torn from the unity of our own mother, and that's a puzzle. That's at best is a real puzzle. It's also traumatic. It's a traumatic experience to be separated, and it affects us all in different ways. I've studied, in the training of my students, we have about 7 or 8 pages of research that's been done of bullet points of different events during a birth or a pregnancy and the way they affect us in later life. And it's staggering when we teach that class to our students, some of them breaking down into tears, some of them going, oh my God, that's why I'm the way I am. And it helps them understand the fundamentals of why they are the way they are. So there's something about that separation that can't be resolved with relief. And the whole idea of leaning into an external supply of something that will change that for me is that, yeah, it can bring relief, but it's not bringing resolution. And there's a distinction between the two. And we've learned in our lives, we've been taught in our lives to settle for relief. That's why the drugstore is full of all those little colored things that we can get, or liquids that we can get to give us relief. And relief is advertised as if it were resolution, actually. So we've lost the distinction between the two. And there's something about, if we can create the ability to not take the relief and experience the gap, the emptiness that exists when that relief is not received, it can be very enlightening. And I think even the 12 steps are good at that too, because 12 steps are supplying a new way of seeing things and a new way of experiencing things that can fill that gap. And so, as much as anything, the 12 steps has been so successful in supporting people who have addiction. I think for me, the final resolution is in the repairing of the despair. So that the desperateness and the despair that we experience that would make us lean into an addictive habit is a symptom of the separateness that we feel with ourselves. And with all the trauma work that I've done, I've understood that a lot of talk about trauma, a lot of talk about trauma right now is sexy, first of all. It's a hot topic.
It's a buzzword.
Yeah, it's a buzzword, and it's being commodified and all of those things, and no comment on that. I've also noticed in the trauma world a lot of the, trauma release, trauma resolution, trauma this, trauma that. I'm not sure that efforts to resolve trauma are ever going to be as productive as we would wish them to be. I think what can happen is we can accept trauma as our teacher, and we can develop relationship with that teaching. And my experience of people that I've worked with trauma, it's not so much the trauma that needs to be resolved, it's the person that got wounded by the trauma that needs to be restored and regained and reclaimed. Because we threw out the baby with the bathwater. When we had the trauma, we didn't want to remember it, and then we don't want to remember the feelings that came up. We don't want to remember, that part of us that got isolated or wounded or abused or damaged or injured, and so we disconnect from it. And when you consider how many times in our childhood we've been dashed and shamed and blamed and hurt and wounded and sexually abused, whatever it's been, there are whole loads of who we are. There are masses of pieces of who we are as human beings that have been not just left behind and forgotten about, but stuffed into a closet and
Mm.
locked up, and the key's been thrown away because it's too uncomfortable to reconcile with that. I don't want to think of the time that I was abused by my uncle. I don't want to go there. Well, here's the good news. I don't think we do need to go there, but we do need to sneak around the back
Yeah.
and help that little one that got stuck behind it, because that's a miserable existence. There's a part of us that is miserable, that is not resolved, and there's no thing that I can take or do that can help him unless I create a bridge between him and me so he can come back to me and feel safe. Because as long as I'm blaming the world outside me, which I think is one of the greatest symptoms of a need for inner child work, I'm expecting someone outside to provide the solution. I'm abdicating from my own sense of responsibility. And these are brutal words, but I believe there's truth in saying that no matter where we are in our lives right now, it's what we want.
Mm.
And it's hard to even say it, and it's hard to sometimes hear it if I'm sitting in the mire of my own depression and someone says to me, "You're getting exactly what you want."
Right.
But I don't mean to be mean when I say that. I say it from the perspective of, if I am willing to reclaim my ability to respond to a situation that has damaged me in my life, so if I'm able to take back my responsibility, to reclaim my ability to respond, then I could change the outcome.
Mm.
But if I'm not willing to do that, I can't get the tip of my shovel under the rock. That rock is going to stay there. So there comes a moment of embracing that ugly truth that even if I'm not creating the fact that I got raped, even if I didn't create that, I can create my response to it now. I don't have to live under that burden forever. So that sense of reclaiming responsibility to me is not just fundamental in getting agency, but it's also fundamental in becoming whole again. Because once we learn to do that once, and I use a process called the bridge, which is in my book, the once I learn to build the bridge between my inner child and myself, I promise you, there are a whole horde of little inner children that want to climb over that bridge. It's not like I've got to keep doing it forever,
Yeah.
but that's when I can get resolution. But it does take a moment of sitting in the discomfort of
Mm.
non-resolution and staying watchful and becoming the detective of that experience, not becoming the victim of that experience. And at that point, we're learning how to get our own hands on the wheel instead of being in the back of a taxi with a mad taxi driver that's taking us anywhere, every which way,
Yeah.
right? So, there is a way we can create that sense of creativity, even, even if we're really mired in the victimhood of the original experience. And that's what I do. That's what I love to do, is to see the
Right.
transformation that happens in people when. And you spoke of that just yourself at the beginning of the podcast. You said, "Well, how could I use his type? Well, I'm not, but I'm not
Yeah.
my not his story." And you were able to get the tip of the shovel under that and say, "Well, what if I
Yes.
say the opposite? That's true too, right?
But as you said
Wow.
at the beginning, 50-50 chance. It's 50-50 not true and true.
Yeah, exactly.
And the human condition of wanting everything yesterday, our hustle culture, our avoidance and inability to sit with discomfort, and to want the quick fix and this, like, what's the smoking bullet or the smoking gun here that gets me to the other side and avoid the messy middle, which is now you're missing the whole point. And you're not going to get there if you keep trying to bypass what is intrinsic. And I think that there's a lot of, like the positive vibes only and all this toxic positivity where we don't give space and we don't increase our capacity to have the full range of all the good, the bad, the ugly, all the human range of emotions. And just because of, for my audience, so many people are thinking about their relationship with alcohol specifically is what I help with. But if somebody is listening to this in early sobriety and perhaps they still feel anxious or disconnected or unsure, what would you want them to hear about this work and what's possible?
Well, your inner child is there waiting to be rescued. There ain't no one else that's going to do it but you. And your inner child is very patient.
Mm.
And it calls upon you to make the choice that you want to reclaim parts of yourself that you've been separate from. I can promise you it's a wonderful journey, and it's so fulfilling, and literally you're becoming full of yourself, and um, it empowers you, it makes you feel stronger, it makes you feel more playful, more joyful, more creative, more able to appreciate the things that the old habit might have actually anesthetized you from being able to notice. So there's a huge gain. It's the gain of you. It's the gain of
Mm.
your own intimacy with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and and becoming whole, as you said. And I tell my clients this all the time. Everything that they want to be, all like the vision board stuff that they might have done before, and all the affirmations that they write, all their highest version of themselves is already inherent in them. But all the layers of stress and trauma and familial societal programming gets built on top of it. And I think that with every time we decide to go into a journey or into just, okay, I'm going to notice my breath, then we're burning off those layers that bring us and restore us, allow us to remember what wholeness is.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that there's still, and this will be, some of our last questions here, but what do you say to the people who say breath work isn't for me, don't want to do it, and coincidentally, they're often the ones that kind of need it the most. They're maybe stuck in their heads, they're skeptical of feeling their emotions. Like, how do you shift people from saying like, "Nah, I'm not going to breathe," like that lady in the boardroom?
Yeah, we had someone at the SHRM conference who came up and said, I work for the biggest cable company in North America, and she's the vice president of human resources, and she said, I've got thousands of people on the floor, and I would love to make them more productive. And so I said, well, if you make them breathe for 1 minute an hour, you probably get 15 minutes more production.
Mm.
And she said, well, show me some statistics. And I said, well, sure, I will, but why don't you try it? No, 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 show me some statistics. It's like I think I think the quip that comes to mind when I hear someone say that is, well, you're doing it already anyway, so you're
Right.
just not noticing it. But I don't think that's particularly valuable. Honestly, I think oh, that's my puppy. Let me say hello. There he is.
Oh, hi. Very cute. What's his name? Her name?
His name is Paco.
Paco?
Paco, yeah.
Lovely. Nice to meet you, Paco.
Yeah, I hope everybody's okay with him coming into the show.
A
Uh,
100%. We are big dog people.
okay, great, good, good. He's been so good. He's been sitting at my feet for the whole time we've been together. So then he started wriggling, and I picked him up. And anyway, um, honestly, I kind of let them go. I've got enough people who want to do
Mm.
this, and if I'm not able to inspire them to do it, then maybe it's someone else who's going to be better at it than me. That's kind of the way I feel. Um, and I think rather than, again, it's like falling into the wrong kind of conversation. I don't want to persuade. I don't want to persuade. This is an invitation.
Mm.
And what I do know is that, and I say this to all of my graduates, you've got to be really careful how you talk about the breath,
Yeah.
because you can turn people off really quickly. And on the other hand, if you talk from the breath and who you've become as a result of making breath a practice, you'll inform people in a different way, and you'll inspire them rather than be giving them data or trying to persuade or anything like that. So I think the breath it has its own power. It doesn't need my power of delivery. I'm I feel a bit like the waiter, you know, I'll just bring the food and you enjoy it.
And that's that, I feel like exemplifies you working and moving from a place of your calling versus your ego. Like, to come back to the start of our conversation, and I think that that's sometimes what I get wrong in my own delivery uh, with people that I love. I just want everybody to feel good, right? And like, here's this really cool thing that you can do, and you don't have to pay money for it. Like, this is something that you can do. Like, why aren't you just doing it? But I really, that's a little nugget right there that I'm going to take with me. So thank you for that. Anthony, like, this has been such a really cool, great conversation. I'm very grateful for your time, your presence, and the depth that you bring to this work. Before we wrap things up, I'd love for you to share what's happening in your world right now, whether it's trainings, community offerings, or ways that listeners can go deeper with you and the alchemy of breath. And then I'd love to know if there's one thing that you hope somebody is listening takes away from this conversation, and that they can take away, what that would be.
Okay, so what's going on right now? We've got a whole bunch of breath camps happening. They're 1 week long and they're going on until the end of August. And then we have a 3 week land-based training to become a facilitator of this work. And it's in the beautiful rolling hills of Tuscany. And we also do online trainings. Our next online cohort starts in November, and it's already quite full. So it would be a good moment to make a move. If you want to check out what Alchemy of Breath is about, go to alchemyofbreath.com and you'll get a pop-up inviting you to breathe with us. We do something called Breathwork, which is a free offering. We've been doing it now we're in our 10th year. And it's every morning, every evening UK time. So if you're in North America, you would be around somewhere around noon for you. It's 5 p.m. UK time and 9:30 a.m. UK time for anybody who's in the eastern side of the world. And that's a great chance to have a little half-hour breath work. We have our best facilitators that we showcase there, and sometimes myself and my wife come and do one too. And it's a half an hour, but it's also in community. And the concept of breathing in community means that we've got people who've just met and getting married and have had children together, and there are several hundred people breathing together and getting to know each other on a whole different level. So if you do need support in your private life, this is such a wonderful way to get it and to connect with other people and create new friendships. And then please check out my book and give me a true review. I don't want anything fake, but I think it would mean a lot to me if you give me some straight feedback. And about the wish, well, I think the most salient, the most significant one for me right now, because of where we went with the conversation, would be that the next time you hear someone or someone hurts you, or you see someone treating someone else unkindly, see if you can take a breath and understand that underneath in that human being is an inner child that has been alone for a long, long time and is coming out to control things because it's bitter and angry and unnoticed. So see if you can give some kind of compassion or compassionate recognition of what's going on underneath, behind the mind of the abuser. Because if we don't learn to do that, we're not going to really fix things. We need to learn how to forgive. All of that's in the book. Enjoy the story. There's a QR code. You can join the community if you
Yeah.
if you read the book. There are other people that are reading it at the same time as you, and I join it once in a while and speak to you and ask you questions and leave some videos and stuff. So it's just a great way to make life more friendly, and I hope it's of service.
Beautiful. I will definitely link all of that in the show notes so that our collective audiences can have access to that compassion for everybody, no, regardless of what's happening. I think it's such a beautiful message to end off on. Anthony, thank you again for your time and your energy. To everyone listening, please go check out Anthony and his work via Alchemy of Breath. It is truly one of those transformational communities. And if you like this episode, please like, share, review, leave a comment. You can check out my socials below as well. And in the meantime, breathe it in, be deliberate, and please be good to yourselves.